The concert hall was buzzing with energy. People were chatting quietly, their eyes wandering over the grand stage, the shining piano sitting in the middle, waiting to be played. The seats were almost full, and everyone seemed excited to hear music that evening. It was supposed to be just another recital, another evening of melodies and applause. But little did anyone know that the night would turn into something unforgettable. Among the audience, people were dressed in their best clothes. Some were critics who had spent years evaluating musicians, some were teachers, and some were simply music lovers hoping for a beautiful performance. There was a sense of expectation in the air, a mix of curiosity and excitement. People whispered about the performers, guessing who would impress and who might just be ordinary. Most of them had no idea what was about to happen. Backstage, a young girl was waiting nervously. She couldn't see the world around her, but she could feel every sound, every movement. The hum of voices, the shuffling of feet, even the soft clink of cups being moved somewhere behind the curtains, all of it painted a picture in her mind. She knew the stage would be bright, and she knew the audience would stare. But she also knew one thing clearly: the music she carried inside her heart was stronger than any fear. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers trembling slightly. She wasn't just nervous because of the audience. She was nervous because she knew what was expected. People had high hopes, but most didn't expect much from someone like her, a blind girl, standing alone in a hall full of strangers, with a grand piano that demanded confidence and skill. Some might call it courage, others might call it foolishness. But she didn't care about labels. What mattered to her was the music. Suddenly, a voice from behind the curtains called her name, announcing that it was time. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her chest, grounding her. Every step she took toward the piano was measured and careful. She could feel the floor beneath her, the edges of the stage, and the faint vibrations of the music still lingering in the hall. When she reached the piano, she paused for a moment, letting her fingers hover over the keys, feeling their texture, their cold smoothness. It was a moment of connection, a silent promise that she would speak through her music. The audience could sense something unusual as she settled onto the bench. There was a strange mix of curiosity and doubt. Some leaned forward, wondering if this would be a disaster. Some smiled politely, ready to applaud no matter what, out of respect for the effort. But most people were unsure. The girl looked so small compared to the large piano, and the world-famous concert hall suddenly felt enormous around her. People whispered quietly, exchanging glances. They had all seen many performances, but they had never seen someone like her in this position. And that made the tension in the room almost tangible. A famous pianist, sitting in the front row, whispered something to the person next to him, laughing softly. His eyes scanned her with a mixture of amusement and disbelief, clearly thinking that this would be an easy evening, that the girl would struggle to play a simple note. His arrogance filled the space around him, but the girl didn't notice. She didn't need to. She had been practicing in her mind for years, imagining the keys, the melodies, the way her fingers would move. She knew the music even though she couldn't see the piano. Her world had always been full of sound, full of rhythm, full of emotion. This stage, this hall, these people, it was just another layer of the world she already knew. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, not out of fear, but to center herself. In that silence, she felt the vibrations of the piano beneath her fingertips. She imagined the story she wanted to tell, the emotions she wanted to share, the way the music would flow like a river, carrying the audience with it. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing became steady, and her fingers rested lightly on the keys. Everything else, the whispers, the doubts, the laughter of the pianist, faded into nothing. There was only her and the piano, ready to speak a language that everyone could understand. The lights seemed brighter now, the hall fuller, and the world heavier with anticipation. Some audience members straightened in their seats, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. No one knew what it would be, but the energy shifted. There was a quiet tension, almost like the moment before the first drop of rain in a long drought. The kind of anticipation that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. And in that moment, the girl opened her hands over the keys, ready to make the first sound that would change the night forever. The moment her fingers hovered over the keys, a hush fell across the audience. People stopped shifting in their seats, stopped whispering, even the ones who had been chatting nervously just moments before. There was a strange sense of expectation in the air, as if everyone instinctively knew that this wasn't going to be an ordinary performance. Some leaned forward, curious but also skeptical. After all, a blind girl at a grand piano in a hall filled with experts and critics seemed like an unusual sight. It was easy for people to doubt, easy for them to underestimate her dot at the front. A well-known pianist smirked, folding his arms and shaking his head slightly. His confidence was visible, and the faint laugh that escaped him was almost audible to the audience. He had spent years mastering his craft and performing in halls like this. In his eyes, there was no doubt about what he expected. The girl would fumble, she would struggle, and she would fail. To him, this was just another moment of amusement, a distraction in his evening. But what he didn't realize, and what no one in the hall fully understood yet, was that the girl had spent her life preparing for this very moment in ways that were invisible to the world. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a brief pause. It wasn't fear, not exactly, it was more like focus. She could feel the smooth, cold surface of the piano keys beneath her fingertips, and she could sense the space around her. Every sound in the hall, the soft clearing of a throat, the faint rustle of clothing, even the distant echo of a footstep seemed sharper now, almost guiding her. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a companion, a friend that knew her story, a place where she could speak without words. She let her hands find their place and imagined the music flowing through her before. She even touched the keys. The audience watched, some with curiosity, others with doubt. A few children in the front row leaned forward, excited, sensing something special, though they didn't know what. The adults, used to judging talent by appearances, had their eyes fixed on her hands, expecting them to stumble, expecting hesitation. The tension was palpable. Every person in the hall seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for the moment when the music would either begin or fail. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, she pressed down a key. It was a soft, delicate note, but it was perfect. The sound filled the hall in a way that felt bigger than the room itself. The note lingered, carrying with it a sense of calm and clarity that made people sit up straighter. There was a pause, almost like the world was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. And then another note followed, this one deeper, warmer, resonating with emotion. The music didn't just play, it spoke. It told a story that transcended sight and expectation, a story that came from the heart. At first, the pianist in the front row could hardly believe what he was hearing. The smirk on his face slowly faded, replaced by a flash of surprise. He leaned slightly forward, trying to understand, trying to find the flaw he had assumed must be there. But there was no flaw. Every note was precise yet full of feeling. Every chord, every pause, every gentle crescendo seemed intentional, deliberate, and alive. He could hear not just the skill, but the soul behind it. And slowly his doubt began to turn into something else. The audience felt it too. Those who had doubted her began to listen with a different kind of attention. People who had been ready to applaud politely now sat mesmerized, unable to look away. The music flowed like a river, moving from gentle ripples to powerful currents, carrying every listener with it. Some felt goosebumps rise on their arms. Others felt a lump form in their throats, emotions they hadn't expected to encounter on an ordinary evening. And yet, none of them could speak, not because they didn't want to, but because the music had spoken first. Backstage, the organizers watched nervously, expecting some kind of mishap. They had prepared for a normal recital, one where each performance would be applauded politely and perhaps critiqued harshly afterward. But this was different. The young girl, blind to the hall and the people in it, had transformed the room entirely. The energy of the hall shifted, and with every note, the music reached farther, deeper, as if it were searching for the hearts of everyone present. Her fingers moved across the keys, with a confidence that belied her years. Each motion was deliberate, each chord carefully considered. But at the same time, it was effortless, fluid, almost like the piano itself was guiding her, helping her tell the story she had kept inside for so long. People in the audience felt as if they were not just listening to a performance, they were living it. They could see the peaks and valleys, the joy and the sorrow, the moments of quiet reflection and the bursts of intensity. Every emotion was painted in sound, and it was impossible to look away. The pianist in the front row could no longer deny what he was hearing. He had spent years learning every technical trick, perfecting every piece he played. Yet here was a young girl, blind to the world, creating music that touched him in ways he hadn't expected. He shifted in his seat, his arms now resting on the chair's armrests, his mind trying to comprehend how someone so small, so unassuming, could command such a profound presence. A mixture of humility and admiration began to replace the skepticism in his eyes. The girl, meanwhile, was unaware of all of this. She wasn't playing to prove anything to anyone, and she wasn't playing to impress. She was playing because the music lived inside her, because it had always been there, waiting to be shared. Every note was a part of her, every chord a story, every pause a breath of emotion. She felt the energy of the room, but she didn't let it distract her. Instead, it seemed to strengthen her, reminding her why she loved music so much, why she had spent countless hours feeling the notes in her fingers, imagining every melody in her mind. As the piece built, the room seemed to vibrate with the music. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with emotion. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others were leaning forward, holding their breath, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. And the girl continued, unfazed, fully immersed in the world she was creating with sound. The hall that had seemed so large and intimidating a few minutes ago now felt like it had been built specifically for her music, as if every wall, every seat, every listener had been waiting for this moment. And then, suddenly there was a brief pause. The music softened to a gentle whisper, a single note that lingered in the air. The audience exhaled, almost unconsciously, as if the world had paused with her. The power of what they were witnessing was hard to put into words. Some people looked around, checking the expressions on other faces, only to realize that everyone felt the same awe, the same reverence for the talent they were hearing. No one dared applaud yet. It felt too soon, almost like it would break the magic if they did. In that moment, the girl's presence became larger than the hall itself. She had transformed doubt into admiration, skepticism into wonder. People who had been ready to mock or dismiss her had been silenced by her music. And the famous pianist, once confident and amused, now sat humbled, struggling to find words. Struggling even to breathe normally as the music reached parts of him he hadn't known could be reached. For the first time that evening, the audience began to understand something profound. Talent doesn't always come in the form we expect. Brilliance isn't always visible, and skill isn't always obvious. Sometimes it exists quietly, waiting for a moment to shine, waiting for a stage, waiting for an audience willing to listen. And tonight they were witnessing exactly that. A young girl, blind to the world, giving a performance that no one would forget. A moment that would linger in their hearts long after the music ended. As the piece continued, building slowly from soft, delicate notes to richer, deeper chords, the hall seemed to transform. People sat straighter, felt more alive, and let the music wash over them like a wave. Children held their breath, parents clutched the edges of their seats, and even the most critical listeners could only sit in awe. The music didn't just fill the hall. It filled the hearts of everyone present, leaving them feeling something they hadn't expected. Pure, unfiltered wonder. And in that quiet, electrifying tension, it became clear this was not just a performance. This was a moment in time that would be remembered, a story of courage, talent, and the magic of music itself. The girl, blind yet fearless, had already changed the evening, and no one in the hall would ever see music in the same way again. The music had already captured the hearts of everyone in the hall, but now it was reaching a new level, something deeper, more powerful. The girl's fingers moved across the piano keys with such fluidity and confidence that it seemed as though the instrument was an extension of her own body. Every note, every chord, every pause told a story. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a conversation, a connection between her and everyone listening. The sounds seemed to weave through the air, wrapping around the audience, touching each person differently but profoundly. People who had been skeptical at the beginning now sat completely still. Some leaned forward, trying to catch every nuance, while others closed their eyes, letting the music flow into them. You could feel a shift in the atmosphere of the hall. It was no longer just a concert. It had become a shared experience, almost sacred, where every sound held meaning and every pause spoke volumes. It was impossible not to be affected by it, impossible to remain indifferent. The famous pianist, who had been sitting in the front row with a smirk and crossed arms, was now leaning forward in disbelief. He had spent years mastering his craft, performing in grand halls and receiving applause, but he had never felt anything like this. Every note she played seemed to speak directly to him, bypassing all his thoughts, all his doubts, and going straight to his heart. For the first time in his life, he realized that music wasn't just about technique or fame, it was about emotion, about connection, about expressing the parts of yourself that words could never reach. The girl was unaware of the reactions around her. She didn't need to be. Her mind and heart were entirely focused on the music. She played with intention, allowing each note to carry the weight it deserved, each chord to linger just long enough to resonate. Her world, though without sight, was full of colors created by sound shades of joy, sadness, hope, and longing. She painted pictures with her fingers, and the audience could see them clearly, even without colors or images. Because she had made them feel, the melody shifted, becoming more complex yet still flowing with ease. It moved like a river that had begun as a gentle stream and was now gathering strength, picking up momentum, carrying with it everything in its path. The audience felt their hearts race with the rising notes, their breaths caught in their throats with each sudden pause, their emotions stirred by the gentle, quiet moments in between. Every person in the hall was living the music, experiencing it in a way that went far beyond listening. It was a shared heartbeat, a collective feeling of awe and wonder. Backstage, the organizers had stopped moving. They couldn't bring themselves to speak. They had expected a normal recital, something safe and routine, but what was happening on stage was extraordinary. It wasn't just talent. It was presence, it was soul. The young girl, blind and quiet, was commanding the room in a way that no one could have anticipated. Her performance was no longer about proving anything. It was about revealing the beauty that had always been there, waiting to be heard, waiting to be felt. Some of the audience members had tears in their eyes, though they tried to hide them. They had come expecting entertainment, a pleasant evening of music, but what they were receiving was something far greater, a glimpse into a world of pure expression, unfiltered and honest. It was a reminder that greatness often comes quietly, without fanfare or recognition, and sometimes it appears in the most unexpected forms. A blind girl at a piano in a grand hall had turned an ordinary evening into a profound human experience. The piece continued to build, reaching its emotional peak. The music surged like a storm, powerful yet controlled, intense yet full of grace. The girl's fingers moved faster now, yet with a precision that seemed effortless. She played not just with skill, but with feeling, as if each note was a piece of her soul being offered to the world. The audience felt it too, as if they were holding a fragile, precious thing in their hands, something sacred that could be destroyed if they looked away. Even the most hardened critics, who had come expecting to find flaws or weaknesses, were silenced. Their pens remained still, their eyes wide, their hearts full. They had witnessed many performances in their lives, but they had never seen anything like this. The music had broken through every expectation, every judgment, every assumption, leaving only pure emotion in its wake. It was impossible to analyze, impossible to critique. It could only be felt, deeply and completely. The pianist in the front row finally moved, slowly at first, then more assuredly, as if drawn forward by the sheer force of the music. He watched her hands, watched the way her fingers glided over the keys, watched the way she seemed to disappear into the sound she was creating. And in that moment, he felt something he had never felt before: humility. He understood that no amount of fame or practice could replace the authenticity, the courage and the depth of feeling that she brought to the piano. He had been challenged not just as a musician but as a human being, to recognize that true talent could appear in ways he had never imagined. The melody softened now, moving into a gentle, tender passage. It was like the storm had passed, leaving calm in its wake. The audience leaned in, holding their breath, savoring every note. The girl's hands moved delicately, almost whispering the music, yet the impact was immense. Every pause was intentional, every note a reflection of the journey she had taken, every chord a testament to the emotions she carried inside her. People felt tears welling up, felt their hearts swell, felt a quiet reverence for the talent and bravery they were witnessing. It was a moment that seemed to stretch forever. The audience knew they were part of something rare, something magical. They were witnesses to the triumph of spirit over doubt, of courage over fear, of the human heart over all obstacles. The music told a story of resilience, of hope, of beauty that cannot be contained by circumstances or limitations. It was a reminder that talent and passion are often hidden, waiting for the right moment to shine, and when they do, they can move the world, the girl continued, her performance now flowing naturally, effortlessly. She had entered a state of complete connection with the piano, with the music, with the people listening. Each note, each chord, each movement was part of a larger story, a story that transcended her own life, a story that touched every person in the hall. She played not to impress, not to prove anything, but simply to express. And that was why the music was so powerful, so unforgettable. By the time the final notes approached, the room was completely silent. No one dared move, no one dared breathe too loudly, afraid of breaking the magic. The music built to a final, triumphant chord, ringing out and filling every corner of the hall. It was strong, confident, beautiful, and full of life. The note lingered, vibrating in the air, and for a moment it felt as if time itself had stopped. The audience remained still, hearts pounding, eyes wide, unable to fully comprehend what they had just experienced, and then slowly, the applause began. A single clap, tentative but full of awe, echoed through the hall. Another followed, then another, until the entire room was clapping, cheering, some people standing, some crying, some simply smiling with tears in their eyes. The music had ended, but its impact would last forever. It was a performance that would be remembered, shared, and spoken about for years. It was a reminder of the power of human courage, talent, and emotion. A testament to the idea that sometimes the most unexpected people can create the most extraordinary moments. The pianist in the front row finally stood, clapping slowly, his face full of admiration and humility. The arrogance that had been there moments before was gone, replaced by respect and wonder. He understood now that he had witnessed something rare, something extraordinary, something that words could barely describe. The girl had not just played the piano, she had touched souls, broken barriers, and created a moment that no one would ever forget. The applause didn't stop. It started softly, one person clapping, then another, until the entire hall was alive with sound. People rose to their feet, cheering, some laughing with joy, some wiping tears from their eyes. It wasn't just applause for skill or talent, it was an acknowledgement of something far greater. It was a recognition of courage, determination, and the power of a heart that refused to be limited by the world. The girl remained seated at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, as if she had only just realized the effect she had on everyone. For a moment, the hall was filled with an almost sacred silence again. People stopped clapping just for a second, as if trying to let the experience sink in fully. No one wanted to speak, because words felt small compared to what had just happened. They had been witnesses to something rare, something that couldn't be rehearsed or duplicated. This wasn't a performance that would fade with time. It was a memory that would stay with them forever. It was a story they would tell for years, the kind that made them believe in the unexpected, the impossible, and the extraordinary. The famous pianist who had been seated at the front row finally stepped forward. His usual air of confidence had been replaced by humility. He approached her carefully, almost reverently, as if he were walking into a temple. The hall seemed to pause, waiting for the interaction between the two of them. People watched with anticipation, unsure of what he would say. He didn't speak loudly or announce himself. Instead, he leaned slightly toward her and whispered words that only she could hear. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a gesture of respect and admiration. The girl smiled softly, not because she sought recognition, but because she understood that the moment they had shared was real. Genuine and human. People in the audience continued to clap, but now there was something different in their expressions. It wasn't just admiration for a performance, it was something deeper. They felt inspired. They had witnessed a young girl, blind and underestimated by almost everyone, turn an ordinary night into a moment of wonder and magic. Some thought about their own lives, about the times they had doubted themselves or let fear hold them back. They realized that courage and talent often exist quietly, waiting for the right moment to shine, and that when they do, they can change everything. The girl finally stood, carefully moving away from the piano. She had felt every vibration, every note, and she carried that experience with her. Her steps were confident, though gentle, as she walked toward the edge of the stage. People continued to cheer, some waving, some reaching out, wanting to show their appreciation. She paused, feeling the energy of the room surround her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly take in what had just happened. The applause was not just for her skill, it was for her courage, her heart, and the music that had come from within her. Backstage, the organizers were talking in hushed, excited tones. They had expected a normal recital, something safe and polite, but what had happened on that stage exceeded everything they had imagined. They were filled with awe and gratitude, realizing that they had been witnesses to something rare. The performance had not only captivated the audience, but had also reminded everyone present why they loved music in the first place. It was a reminder that true talent cannot be measured by appearances, that greatness often comes quietly, and that the most unexpected people can create the most extraordinary moments. The audience began to settle slowly, but the energy in the hall was still electric. People were talking in low voices, sharing their amazement with the person next to them. Some were crying quietly, overwhelmed by the emotion they had just felt. Others were laughing softly, unable to contain the joy that had been stirred in their hearts. And all the while, the girl moved with quiet grace, accepting the admiration with a humility that only added to the respect everyone felt for her. She did not boast. She did not demand attention. She simply let her music speak for her, and in doing so, she had left an impression that words could never capture. The famous pianist stayed near the stage for a while, watching her carefully. He had learned something that evening, something more valuable than any lesson in technique or composition. He had learned that talent cannot be measured by sight, by experience, or by reputation alone. Talent is a living thing, something that grows in the heart and flourishes when it is nurtured with passion and courage. He had been humbled, and in that humility he felt a sense of admiration that went beyond words. He understood that the girl had not just played the piano, she had touched hearts, changed perspectives, and reminded everyone of what is truly important in life. The girl returned to the piano one last time, reaching out her hands, not to play, but to gently touch the keys, acknowledging the instrument that had been her partner through it all. She ran her fingers lightly across the smooth surface, remembering every note she had played, every chord, every emotion she had poured into the music. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a moment to connect with the music one last time before leaving the stage. The audience watched silently, sensing the significance of her gesture, feeling as if they were witnessing the closing of a beautiful chapter in a story that had touched them deeply. As she walked off the stage, people continued to cheer, some standing, some clapping vigorously, all filled with a sense of joy and awe. The young girl, blind yet extraordinary, had turned a simple recital into a life-changing experience. She had reminded everyone present that talent, courage, and heart can break barriers and expectations. She had shown them that limitations exist only when we allow them to, and that true greatness often comes from within, quietly, without fanfare. Yet, with unstoppable force, outside the concert hall, the night air was calm and peaceful. But the energy from inside seemed to linger, invisible yet powerful. People left slowly, talking in hushed tones, sharing their feelings with strangers and friends alike. They had been part of something remarkable, and that sense of wonder stayed with them. Even those who had come with skepticism found themselves changed, thinking about what they had witnessed, thinking about the courage it takes to step into the unknown and let one's true self shine. The girl went home that night feeling a quiet happiness, a sense of fulfillment that had little to do with applause or recognition. She had shared something important, something real, and it had been received with love and admiration. She understood that the impact of her performance would continue far beyond that night. In the hearts of the people who had listened, in the memories they would carry, and perhaps in the lives they might live differently because they had been reminded of what is possible when courage meets talent. The world outside continued as usual. But for those who had been in the hall, something had changed. They had seen proof that greatness can appear in unexpected forms, that the human heart has boundless potential, and that music, when played with passion and honesty, can move souls in ways nothing else can. The girl, blind yet fearless, had created not just a performance but a legacy. A single evening had become a story of inspiration, hope, and wonder, a story that would be remembered for years, whispered in hallways, shared in conversations, and cherished in memories. Even the critics who had planned to write reviews and find flaws left the hall quietly, unable to put into words what they had felt. They realized that sometimes the most important things cannot be analyzed or dissected. They must simply be experienced, felt in the heart, and remembered. That night, they had experienced something extraordinary. The girl had played, and in doing so, she had reminded everyone that the human spirit is capable of incredible beauty when it is allowed to shine. As the concert hall emptied, there was a lingering sense of magic in the air. The chairs, the piano, even the walls seemed to hum with the energy that had been created. It was a memory etched into the building itself, a testament to the power of one brave, determined, and extraordinarily talented young girl. She had entered the hall quietly, unsure of how she would be received, and she had left it changed, not just for herself, but for everyone who had witnessed her courage, her skill, and her heart. That night became a story people would tell again and again, about a blind girl who approached the piano and, through her music, made the world pause, listen, and feel. It was a story about talent, but more importantly about heart, courage, and the human ability to create moments that last forever. And in the quiet of her own home, the girl smiled, knowing she had shared something beautiful, something true, and something unforgettable.